Hello everybody, it's Andrew Hutchings here, still not a licensed physician, still never giving medical advice. It's purely educational and entertainment. In this video, I'm probably going to title something like the death bias. But it applies to more things than just dead people. So, there are many biases and limitations and design flaws associated with medical studies. One such one is when examining dead people. So you may have, let's say, a virus, and it kills people. Well, you examine the dead people. Well, someone else examines dead people, and they say, oh, this virus does X, Y, and Z. Well, does it really? No. Probably not. It does that in people who died from it. Because you're forgetting about the obvious fact. You're only looking at people who died from it. So if you examine the effects of cocaine usage, and you examine dead bodies, and you go, oh, in cocaine users, it causes liver scarring and heart, and I'm just make up a whole bunch of stuff and say that it does that. Well, it does that in people who died from it. We don't know anything about all the other people. You do not know whether someone who has been using it for 10 years is going to have any of those problems at all. You just know that someone who uses it so much that they die from it has those problems, and maybe one of those problems is what killed them. So yes, the death bias. When looking at studies involving dead people, make sure you remember that's only in the people who died from it. Everyone else may be the exact opposite. Perhaps those are just people that have really weird genetics who respond extremely unusually and die from it, so they also got all this other weird stuff going on, and that it's completely fine for everybody else. And another bias is the hospital bias. When medical studies, or even just simple observations by people who work as doctors in hospitals, are done on people in hospitals, they go, oh, look, this thing always gets people sick, or people get all messed up from this or from that. And it's like, well, no, do they now? Or is it just that you happen to be seeing all the people that did get messed up or sick from it? It's like, no, lawnmowers don't chop everybody's foot off, but you probably in an emergency room, you're going to see people that had foot chopping off experiences with lawnmowers rather than good experiences. Because is someone going to come in because they mowed their lawn and didn't have any problems? No, you'll never see that person. You'll never see a million other of them. But you will see the one person who manages to chop their foot off. And then you go, oh, well, lawnmowers chop people's feet off, like they're horrible. Everyone gets their foot chopped off. Every person I see got their foot chopped off with a lawnmower. Well, yeah, because you didn't see all the other people. The hospital bias is very similar to the death bias. You're only seeing people that actually had problems. It's kind of like the internet bias, where you only get comments by people that feel very strong about commenting. Maybe they had very good experiences, so they comment. Maybe they had very bad experiences, so they comment. But you're typically not going to get the people that were in the middle, who just have average, nothing special experiences. And you're probably going to get a lot more of the negative comments than the positive, because that's just how things are. So always remember to actually think about the data you're getting, and whether it's complete data or just a very subset. Because if you're only examining dead people, you certainly don't have a good idea of what something does to living people. If you're only examining people that got in bad enough condition to go to the hospital, well, you certainly don't have any idea what that stuff does to people who didn't have to go to the hospital. I mean, you may be able to get some idea, but really you don't, because like I said, those could just be the genetic freaks that all have problems with something and end up in the hospital. And everyone else who doesn't have a certain weird genetic mutation is fine. I'm not saying that that's the case all the time, but that may be. You don't know. So many other issues. Like when doing medical studies on people. Well, they tend to do medical studies on people that have problems. Now, yeah, they already have health problems. So how would we know how a healthy person's going to respond? You can't just go, well, that health problem doesn't affect these other... You don't know that. You're assuming that. Maybe you were taught that. Maybe we think that right now. But you know how many times people in scientific field realize they're wrong? Almost 100% of the time. That's why we keep rewriting and updating science. Because people are wrong most of the time. That's something, I'm going to make a separate video on that. It's like one time someone was telling me about these psychological theories, and they probably all have something to them. But I told them, you know, the really funny thing about that is, they were all wrong. Now, I know that's an oversimplification, but they were all replaced by one that was considered, and maybe one of the older ones is actually more true than one of the... The point is that with science, we get one theory, then we get next theory that knocks that one out, then we get next theory which not, and everyone's like, oh yeah, this is what's going on. Well, 10 years later we decide this is what's going on. 10 years later we decide, and it's always going like that. Now, good, intelligent people, like myself, like hopefully how you are, would come up with something, and maybe it gets improved upon later, but it doesn't just get tossed out and replaced. But the thing is, most people, including most people who work as scientists or as doctors, or any intelligent professions, because they're not actually intelligent, they're just robots or monkeys, they come up with stuff and it gets completely overturned and replaced by something else. It's not just a matter of improving upon it most of the time. That's the exception. That's the rarity. That's when you actually have a human being, not a robot monkey or whatever we want to call them. And I say robot because they just go through motions like a robot. And I say monkey because you can train a monkey to do what they do most of the time. Now, I know you can't literally train a monkey to do everything that these people do, because monkeys are really very much less intelligent than humans, and they can't do even very simple things. But you could probably teach a monkey to do a lot of the stuff that these people do. But, of course, training the monkey to discern different colors and shapes of glassware, not going to happen most likely. And the monkey can't speak English, so it can't work with... But I think you get the point that you could practically train a monkey to do what these people do that call themselves scientists or doctors or whatever. It's not a matter of intelligence, it's a matter of just training them, if A, then B. Now that's useful, but you need critical thinking and creativity to actually come up with correct stuff. Yeah, so remember all the biases. If you do a sports study on athletes, remember that they're athletes. They're people that were probably already genetically predetermined to be better at all this stuff, and they've trained a long time. If you do a sports study and you interview out-of-shape people, remember that they're out of shape. Always remember the details of what's making up your study. And make sure you see the whole picture. Luckily, this one study did look wider, but I was reading one study where it goes, people who exercise have a lower percentage of red blood cells. Oh, see, exercise is bad. Now, very often, what would go on in the whole scientific community and the internet and everywhere, they would actually stop there. They'd go, exercise, bad for you. It decreases your red blood cell percentage. Luckily, they had half of a brain and decided, well, let's see how much total blood there is. You know, what's the total amount of red blood cells, not just the percentage. And lo and behold, the total amount grew, but the percentage shrank. So, and the net result was you still had more red blood cells in people who exercised. But if you only looked at the percentages, you could go, oh, well, it decreased the percentage of red blood cells. And the sad thing is, usually people stop right there. Not because they don't want to look at the whole, they don't even realize that there is a bigger picture. Like with the death bias, most people don't even realize it. Like, yeah, you only need a 5th grader IQ to realize that, but most people, or a lot of people, I don't know the exact percent, would not realize that. And always remember that even if there doesn't seem to be any bias, you're still biased by simply you chose these people. These are people that decided there's going to be a lot of people who aren't going to take place in it. They're not going to go to doctors. Remember that. There's a lot of people who are just not going to ever go to a doctor. You don't get any info from them. So many constraints to studies. When I was younger, I always looked up to scientists and thought very highly of medical studies, scientific studies. But as I grew older, I realized that mostly people have no idea what they're doing. And how I learned that is I went to school with them, and they have no idea what they're doing. I know the people that go to more school have a better idea of what they're doing, but I was also around the PhD students, and they don't tend to have it. I mean, I met one who did. Gotta give him credit. The others, no. Maybe they are good at some specific task, which they decide to take a bunch of classes in, but they don't. To be an actual scientist, you have to be able to see the big picture and understand what's going on, not just, this is the data. I got the data. Data doesn't mean anything if you don't have context for it, if you don't realize the limitations to your data. It's completely meaningless without that. And that's the difference between a scientist and a computer monkey, a robot monkey, whatever you want to call them. It's really insane. Now, I know this kind of person's probably not going to, sadly, they may even go through medical school or something, but I was in a 4th year chemical biology class, and we were in a circle getting asked questions, and the girl next to me was asked how she would do a serial dilution. Oh, serial dilution. Complicated thing. In case you don't know what that is, that's when, so a dilution is, say you have like this much juice in a cup and you want to make it half as strong, you pour the same amount of water. Now it's half the concentration. A serial dilution is when you do that, then you keep doing it, and like you make one that's half, then you pull out half of that, you put it, and then you fill up half, so now it's 1/4 of the original, and so on. And she was like, I don't know, can you help me on that one? I don't remember exactly what she said, but like, that's a hard one. But she was like really intimidated by that question. And the PhD student drew a diagram on the whiteboard to explain it to the class. Because, 4th year chemistry and biology students really need to pay attention hard so that they can hope to understand how to do something as simple as you pour you have 5 milliliters of purple liquid, you pour 5 milliliters of clear liquid, then you take 5 milliliters of that one and you pour 5 mil. I mean, you'd end up with less, but you get the point. You just keep diluting it over and over. And to have to explain that concept to someone who has supposedly studied science for 4 years, I'm done. I think you get the point. You explain that to a 5-year-old. My website is andrewhutchings.org, where you can hire me for consultations. My book on tendinitis is out. I recommend you buy it on Amazon, A Systematic Guide to Defeating Tendinitis. And my Instagram is natural_true_fitness.